Hey, Larry here. Acts 29 today, the journey coming to you from Sunny World headquarters in Chiang Mai, Thailand. I'd like to welcome all the viewers in Thailand and from around the world to this edition, where we will be journeying on this journey and pathway to transformation. The most lacking thing there is in the body of Christ today. Why is that? Because it requires a death. And we don't want to die. That is, we, the old man, the outer man, the flesh, it wants to keep doing what it's always done. But real inward transformation and walking in a new resurrected life cannot happen without a death. And that is the number one reason that most Christians never really go through the transformation process. Because it's easier just to do good works and do things, and that's all fine. But carnal Christians is what Paul called them in Corinthians. And they were doing all kinds of things. They fell behind in no gift. They had miracles and all kinds of things going on. And, you know, that place had been established probably for quite a while. That particular body of people, the church. And yet with all that, Paul called them babies that couldn't even talk yet. So he called them carnal Christians because they had not gone on the path of transformation, where we go from the carnal, what can we do for God, to the spiritual, what can God do through us? And that takes a little bit of thinking to see that difference spiritually. But I was doing all kinds of good works for many years, but I was probably a little more than a toddler inside, transformation-wise. And, you know, I could still do all the good works and that all looked good on the outside. But there was still so much pruning and training and transformation that needed to happen on the inside of me. And I would have kept putting that off as long as I could have kept doing the good works. But the road of good works in my life one day came to an end. And that all just shut down. And then I was like, wow, what was that all about? Well, then God began to deal with me about a higher plane, leveling up, and that I needed to break through that ceiling of flesh up into that atmosphere of peace and contentment, and allow Him to slay the things of the flesh that were still left and operating in my life. and get all this stuff taken out and taken care of. Okay, so I need to go on here with where we're at, lest I don't. So, the best preparation for tomorrow is doing what needs to be done today. Now, I think about Noah, and do you think that he was working on the ark for a few hours on Sunday mornings? Once a week? I'm pretty sure that he was working on that ark every day. That's called preparation. And it says that Noah went into the ark and God shut him in. God closed the door. So now we have an ark, the Ark of the Covenant, the very presence of God. And we need to be building that ark, that presence of God every day. Every day. And this is where the breakdown is in the daily. There were 10 virgins. Pretty obvious that 5 were prepared and 5 were not. So while the 5 were preparing, living their lives daily in refilling, what we would see today as refilling in the Spirit every day through the Word, worship, prayer, fasting, just the basics that keep the oil flowing in the fire, the lamp lit. The 5 foolish were doing something else. Maybe they were living their best life now. Because in the end, it says those who were prepared, the extra oil was the preparation, went into the supper, and the door was shut. I could probably stop here and go into this, but I'm going to save it for later. There's a lot there in this 10 virgins. And we'll take a look at that closer here before too long, because it goes along with what I'm talking about on the weekends too. The wide gate and the wide way and the narrow way and all that. The prepared went into the supper and the door was shut. And then he talked about building the house on the rock or the sand. That merely hearing the word but not doing the word was building a house on the sand. No foundation, no strength, nothing. Building on the rock takes a lot of preparation. We're talking about preparation. It takes more time. It takes more energy. It takes more material. And it takes more work. I was a builder for 25 years, some new construction and residential housing, but mostly in remodel. But even a lot of the remodels that were add-ons to the existing structure, if we were adding on a kitchen or a bathroom or a bedroom, we had to go through the same process as if we were building a brand new house. We had to lay the foundation. We had to mark it out on top of the ground. We had to dig down a certain distance. We had to put forms in. We had to pour concrete. We had to make a strong foundation. Well, all the time we're doing that, people are driving by going, there's nothing going on there. You know, if we're building a new house and we're just digging down, there's nothing going up. People drive by and go, people are here, but they're gonna put a new house up, but I don't see anything. Because we don't see the work that's going on in the unseen under the ground. Where the seed is, where the seed begins to break forth and the roots go down first before the blade comes up through the top. So there's a lot going on underneath that people don't see. So they drive by every day and go, I don't see anything. Well, they go down the street and they drive by where the guy's building on the sand and he's just laying out the walls on top of the ground. And in a day or so, he's got all the walls up, he's got some siding on, doors and windows, and the next thing you know, he's got a roof, and people go, wow, look at that. That house went up so fast. And they drive by the other place, and they don't see anything. Well, at the end of the day, when the storm comes, the house on the foundation is still standing, and the one on top of the ground got blew away. So all this speaks of preparation. Preparation. A daily doing. Because it's not a one-time event. People think, well, hey, whoa, wait a minute, I got saved 30 years ago, whatever. Right, and I got filled with the Spirit 30 years ago. But we need to be refilled every day, a refilling. By praying, seeking God, the Word, worship, prayer. All of that is a daily refilling. In the Old Testament, the priest in the temple, they kept the olive oil flowing, kept it burning daily. They didn't let it go out. There was a steady flow of oil to keep the lights on. And today, that oil must keep flowing in us because now we're the priest. And it's up to me to keep that oil flowing and my lamp lit. So it's burning bright. It's up to me. I can't keep your lamp going. See, at the end of the day, see, people want to come and ask you for your oil, what you have. Well, you can't give them that. You can't lay hands on them and go, okay, well, you're out of oil, you're fading, and you're falling out here because you haven't been preparing daily. So I'm going to lay hands on you, and you're going to miraculously receive all the oil that I've been producing for years, day in and day out, when nobody saw anything. Forget it. Ain't happening. Doesn't work that way. And the 5 wise said to the 5 foolish, no, we can't give you of our oil, because then there wouldn't be enough for us. We'd all run out. That was just a type and a shadow of saying, hey, I can't give you what I have. that I've been daily processing and keeping my lamp lit. I can't give that to you. I can't give you my extra oil. My preparation that I've been doing daily for years. I can't give you that. See, and that's the problem. Because the 5 wise had extra oil, so they went out in the procession to go to the marriage supper. The 5 foolish were not in that procession that went in at the proper time. And the door was closed. And the closing there means it was a closing that wasn't open to be opened again. And in those days, they had a little window up toward the top of the door that they could look out to see who was there. And so when the 5 foolish came, I don't think he opened the whole door. I think he opened that window and looked out. And they said, "Hey, let us in, let us in." And he said, "I don't know you. I don't know you. I'm not acquainted with you." And what he was saying was, you are not in the procession when I came to collect my bride and the bridesmaids and all the people that were invited to the supper. You were not in that group that went into the marriage supper of the Lamb. You weren't there. I don't recognize you. You weren't in the procession. You weren't there. I don't know who you are. Because they weren't there when it was time to go in. Wow. Genesis 7:16, and they that entered, male and female of all flesh, went in as God had commanded Noah, and the Lord shut him in and closed the door round about him. Now, all the people on the outside, they begin to go, "Oh, this is what he was talking about, because we are all going to drown." And I'm certain there were some beating on the side of the ark and crying out to open the door. Matthew 25:10, but while they were going away to buy, the 5 foolish, the bridegroom came, and those who were prepared went in with him to the marriage feast, and the door was shut. The time for preparation is before the storm. It's before the storm. Matthew 24:36, but about that day and hour no one knows, not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, but only the Father. As it was in the days of Noah, so it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. For in those days before the flood, people were eating, drinking, marrying, given in marriage. So it's describing a normal events of life. They were just living day to day, same old, day to day, building, buying, selling, marrying, drinking, eating. They were just living life. Up to the day that Noah entered the ark, and they knew nothing about what would happen. until the flood came and took them all away. What did it take him, 100 years to build the ark, something like that? And God says, I gave him 125 years. I gave him 125 years, and they didn't get it. They didn't listen to Noah. They saw what he was doing. They still didn't listen. And I gave them that amount of time. Now, a lot of people say, well, he gave man 125 years, so they think that was like for future, that we were all going to be able to live to 125. It's not what he was talking about. And I don't know any believers. My dad didn't know any believers, although he kept telling me he was going to live to be 125, but he only made it to 89. And his father didn't know any believers that ever made it to 125. He was talking about the time that he had given man up to the time the ark was closed and the rains came. This is how it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. That's how it will be. So it was a time also of total depravity and violence. Sound familiar? The world was filled with violence and wickedness, causing God to regret that he had ever made mankind. It was full of apathy and disregard. Well, we're there. People continued their daily lives without concern for God's warnings. We're there, folks. This is the time. That is the time. People don't care about anything. They just don't care. It was filled with unnatural corruption, intense spiritual corruption, and according to some interpretations, unnatural genetic corruption. It was full of ignored warnings despite Noah being a preacher of righteousness. People ignored the warnings, even though God had given them 125 years. And then there was sudden judgment. And the flood came and suddenly swept them all away, emphasizing the unexpected nature of the coming judgment. Jesus used this analogy to warn that just like the people in Noah's time, society will be caught completely off guard when the Son of Man returns. The era will be marked by extreme wickedness and yet business as usual, with a lack of spiritual alertness. Sounds like today. So this leads us right into Matthew 24. All this is but the beginning, the early pains of the birth pangs of the intolerable anguish. And I, being a researcher, I had to find out the difference between pains and pangs. And I've asked some people, but nobody knew. A pain is something that, kind of comes on gradually and may build to a certain height of pain, may stay, may go, and come back later. It's a pain. But a pang is a sudden, out of the blue jolt, like an earthquake. It doesn't just come on over a day or two. You're just sitting there and all of a sudden, boom, things are shaking. That's a pang. It's instant. I had a slip disc 2 or 3 years ago. I was just bending over brushing my teeth in the sink, and all of a sudden I had a pang. This pain shot across my lower back, and I almost collapsed on the floor. And it was some of the most excruciating pain I think I've ever felt. And that's a pang. Then they will hand you over to suffer affliction and tribulation and put you to death, and you will be hated by all nations for my name's sake. There's a lot of talk today about Christianity, and they throw God's name here and there, and especially in the political circles, and we're gonna protect the Christians. We're gonna protect the Christians in the country, and so there's a lot of this talk about that kind of stuff, and they throw Christianity around a lot. The day's coming when that kind of lukewarm stuff is not going to fly in the face of real persecution. It's going to be different. And then many will be offended and repelled, and will begin to distrust and desert him whom they ought to trust and obey. I think we're there. I see many people being offended and repelled and are distrusting and deserting Jesus in this day, and will stumble and fall away and betray one another and pursue one another with hatred. I have seen these people on YouTube, and their whole channels are nothing but tearing up these other ministries. Now, they may not be, whatever, but it's not my job to just pick somebody out and then try to destroy their credibility, their ministry, their everything about them, and call them evil, wicked, they're going to hell, and on and on. There's false pastors and apostles and prophets and all that. Yeah, they're out there. But it's not up to me to expose all this stuff and just make that my life's work. So, there's a lot of hatred now. People hate this group, that group, the other group, and it's just getting worse and worse. People are getting more upset, and, they're saying things, they're using language they never used to use, and it just keeps going and going. And many false prophets will rise up. Many. Not a few, many. And deceive and lead many into error. Well, we got some of that going on today. And the love of the great body of people will wax cold because of the multiplied lawlessness and iniquity. Well, wax cold. when you look at a candle, that's where wax is. And when the candle's burning, the wax up there around the heat is liquid. It's not hard. It's liquid. But as the flame begins to go out, the wax grows cold and gets hard. It gets hard. It waxed cold. The cold made the wax hardened, not pliable. Because of what? The multiplied lawlessness and iniquity. That's talking about when people see that laws don't matter anymore, that they are ignored and there are no consequences, they say to themselves, so who cares? If they can do whatever they want, then so can we. See, in this day of multiplied lawlessness, where we call, not we, but they call good evil and evil good, and the international laws of justice are ignored, everything's ignored. All the foundational things of a country are just ignored. They just do what they want. They bypass all the normal channels of what should take place and just do whatever they want. Well, then everybody else goes, hey, they're not obeying the law. They're not obeying the rules. So why should we? And see, that goes down throughout the population. So the people don't care about any laws anymore, any rules. It's lawlessness. And so that's when people begin to walk away from the faith. Because well, who cares? So what? And many people are walking away today. I see on, there's whole groups that have formed. I don't know what they call themselves, all kinds of different things. Pastors that are leaving and saying, hey, I was so beat up by the church and so hurt by the church, and now I got to go through therapy, and I'm being unchurched, and I'm coming out of all that strictness and what they tried to lay on me, and on and on and on. But the reason for all that is because of they never got on a pathway of transformation. They never really saw the truth that sets you free. Otherwise, they don't have a problem. They're not going to go through all that. Yes, we all got beat up to some degree in the building on Sunday mornings, of course. That's going to happen. That's just the way it is. But if you're going to let that take you out of the kingdom, Proverbs says if you faint in the day of adversity, your strength is small. But, verse 13, he who endures to the end will be saved. Wow. But he who endures to the end will be saved. Endures. It's another word for suffers. You're not only called to believe on him, but to suffer on his behalf, to endure on his behalf. And this goes all the way to the end. So the question is, but he who endures to the end will be saved. So the question is, what about he who does not endure to the end? What happens to those who do not endure unto the end? Who didn't count the cost when they were building their tower. And we talked about this earlier, that humility means always choosing Jesus. And that means you will always have what you need to finish your tower. Choosing Jesus equals endurance to the end. But this doesn't happen overnight. It happens over days, weeks, months, years of pressing into that, what they call the narrow way, which means the way of pressing, the pressing way. And we're talking about that on the weekends. So, he who endures to the end will be saved. Well, we're going to end right there today, because I'm going to open up this enduring to the end a little more, because it's extremely important. And I wrote a little booklet called ESP and J. And so I'm going to start with that next week. And I'm going to go through this short little booklet that I wrote some years ago. And I've expanded on some of it since then. But this is what will keep us enduring to the end. So, well, I got a new light. It's a little bright in here. I forgot to turn the light down a little bit on the camera, so anyway, thank you so much for tuning in today. We're doing these things to help people so they don't make a shipwreck of their faith. So they don't end up shipwrecked by following some man, some celebrity, preacher, apostle, prophet, whatever, and get off into the ditch. We're doing it to keep people so they can keep on keeping on, so they can get on this path of daily doing the word, not just part-time weekend warriors. There you go, that's a good one. Weekend warriors. My brother was a weekend warrior. That's what we called the people in the National Guard, weekend warriors, because one weekend a month they went and practiced their army stuff, whatever it was. Call them weekend warriors. And when I was selling drugs as a hippie back in the day, we used to go to these small rock concerts that different bands would put on around Portland area there, and these doctors and lawyers and professional people that, you know, we call them weekend hippies, because they would put on a bandana and, you know, a tie-dye shirt and, you know, some baggy pants or whatever. And they would try to, you know, look like a, you know, some of them even wear wigs, you know, long hair wigs. And, you know, we'd be just sitting out on the side of a hill watching the concert and smoking dope and doing our thing. And some, you know, weekend hippie would walk up and go, hey man. Yeah. hey, you got any smoke, man? You got any smoke that I could buy? You know, I need some smoke. It's like, no, man, no. What do you mean? Are you talking about marijuana? Is that what you want? You want to buy some marijuana? And, you know, we could spot these guys a mile away, but some of them were narcs. And so, you know, they'd come around and then they'd arrest people for selling drugs. So, you know, we just never had anything to do with them. You know, we just said, hey, if you're looking for marijuana, you're looking in the wrong place because we don't do drugs. Man. Bro. We don't do drugs. Okay, well, I better stop there. Okay, love you guys. Appreciate you. Thanks for tuning in. And we're just trying to keep people out of the rocks and the things that are just below the surface of the water to wreck their boat. And, you know, we're just trying to get people on the path, keep them on the path, so that they can continue daily to grow, to mature, to develop. And as they do, they put away the childish things that they no longer need, they no longer want. And that is the path of transformation. So, bless you all, and remember, we're not fighting for freedom, we're fighting from freedom. And God willing, I'll see you on the weekend edition. Bye-bye for now.